We owe it to the states to do the work to understand how these proposals affect them. How hard is that? I did it. How hard is it? I'm telling the president that you have been misinformed. You supporting the Senate mark will hurt people who are eligible and qualified for Medicaid.
Hi again, everyone. I'm Alicia Menendez in for Nicole Wallace, and it is 5 o'clock here in Washington, D.C., where the vote-a-rama taking place in the Senate is still underway on that massive domestic spending bill, a bill that would drastically increase our deficit and drastically cut assistance programs like Medicaid and SNAP. Today, a flurry of amendments, mostly put forward by Democrats, are being voted on. Democrats attempting to stop the passage of the bill, or at least cut back on the most extreme parts of it. But as they are in the minority, there is little they can do to truly stop it. However, Republicans can only afford to lose one more vote, having already lost Senators Rand Paul of Kentucky and Thom Tillis of North Carolina. Tillis, as you just heard, came out strongly against the bill in a fiery speech on the Senate floor. And when Donald Trump announced he would support a primary challenger to the senator, Tillis announced he would not seek re-election next year. Tillis is a no vote on this bill because of what it does to our most vulnerable. It slashes $1 trillion in Medicaid, one of the spending cuts to make up for the bill's tax cuts to the wealthiest. The Congressional Budget Office found 11.8 million people would lose their health insurance in the next 10 years if this bill becomes law. Across the board, this bill, it is very unpopular. Poll after poll shows its unfavorability. Yet Trump keeps pushing for it to be on his desk by his July 4th deadline. Senator Chris Murphy this afternoon calling it the most deeply immoral piece of legislation he has ever voted on.
There are going to be kids who go hungry because of this bill. This is the biggest reduction in, nutrition benefits for kids in the history of the country. I mean, this is the most deeply immoral piece of legislation that I have ever voted on in my entire time in Congress. We're obviously going to continue to offer these amendments to try to make it better. So far, not a single one of our amendments to try to make the bill better has passed. But we'll be here all day, probably all night, giving Republicans the chance over and over and over again to slim down the tax cuts for the corporations, or to make life a little bit less miserable for hungry kids, or maybe don't throw as many people off of health care, maybe don't close so many rural hospitals. It's going to be a long day and a long night.
And that is where we start this hour with Democratic Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey. Senator, do you agree with your colleague that this legislation is, quote, immoral?
Well, I'll go further. I think it's a moral obscenity, and it is violence in the sense of what it will do to many families by denying them health care when they're sick, by denying them food when their children are hungry, denying our seniors critical care in their latter years, denying the disabled the kind of support that they need. This bill is a moral obscenity, and I'm stunned that only a few senators on their side of the aisle have even been willing to speak to the impact it will have on their states, their constituents, their rural hospitals, their families, their children in their state. They're not looking plainly at the reality. And then you add in the one thing to me that just exposes a lot of hypocrisy, is the Senate bill blows our deficit up far more than even the House bill did. The Senate version now has our deficit going up about $4 trillion. So they are gutting and cutting programs for millions and millions of Americans and giving tax breaks to billionaires, all while doing such fiscal damage to the stability and strength of America, and racking up a bill that our children will have to pay for.
Senator, I want you to take a listen to what your colleague, Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri, had to say about this bill.
We can't be cutting health care for working people and for poor people in order to constantly give special tax treatment to corporations and other entities.
Okay, so if I just listen to that sound, Senator, I would assume that Senator Hawley was not going to be voting for this legislation. But at this moment, he is counted in that whip count as a yes. Make it make sense.
I can't. I really can't. I've heard everybody from Josh Hawley to Ron Johnson so stridently speak out against parts of this bill, major parts of this bill, but yet they all seem to fall in line when they were doing the motion to proceed. I'm sorry, Josh Hawley needs to understand this is going to take away from working class Americans health care, food aid, and other critical supports. Millions and millions of Americans are going to be paying higher energy costs, are going to see their premiums, annual premiums go up upwards near $1,000. They're going to see more and more people really hurt, while the wealthiest who do not need our support, they do not need our help, the wealthiest will be getting the biggest benefits from this bill, the wealthiest individuals and corporations. That's why I call this bill a moral obscenity. All the basic decency of our country is being offended, undermined, and frankly, just brutalized by this bill.
Senator, you referenced the two Republican senators who have already said they will not be voting for this legislation. Thom Tillis's resignation announcement, did that come as a surprise to you?
It did. I saw his behavior as someone who was preparing to run again. I think that he was right in his statement. This is a sad commentary in our country that a Republican senator who's trying to work across the aisle, trying to find points of compromise, who believed that you could stand your ground and still forge common ground, is going to be put in a situation where he could not win re-election because of the president turning against him and more. So, again, I think it's sad. I've seen a lot of Republican moderates disappear in my short time in the Senate, from people like John Corker or Jeff Flake, who stood up and spoke out against the president. Anybody who doesn't get on board with Donald Trump's way seems to become a casualty in their re-election efforts.
Well, Senator, I think a lot of us watch Senator Tillis on the floor now that he is not running for re-election, now that he is unleashed and speaking truth to power, and wonder if your Republican colleagues who do not have the same luxury are whispering the same to you behind the scenes. Do you get the sense that they know both how damning this is for the American people when it comes to those cuts for Medicaid, those cuts to SNAP, and then politically just how unpopular this bill is?
Well, look, I've had Republican colleagues tell me a lot over the last months of the Trump administration, everything from the unqualified people that Trump has put up for major cabinet positions, all the way to just some foreign policy and national security nightmares like the Secretary of Defense signaling out attack plans. There's a lot of things I know are offending my Republican colleagues, but it doesn't show a profile in courage to whisper those things, to say them privately, but not stand up on the Senate floor like Thom Tillis did yesterday, calling out this bill for what it does to his state and to our nation. We know the truth of this bill. The more people know about the bill, the more people hate the bill, independents, Democrats, and Republicans. They are not telling the truth when they go and defend this bill. The beneficiaries of this bill are going to be the wealthiest in our country. They will see the disproportionate benefits. Average working Americans are going to see higher costs, from their energy costs to their health care costs, and they're going to rack up a deficit that could take generations to pay and will become, just debt service payments are going to become the largest expense in our budget as a country, absent the Social Security benefits we pay out to American seniors.
Senator, I want you to talk me through what we're watching today on the Senate floor, because you have largely Democrats offering amendments that, in the words of your colleague, Senator Murphy, would actually make this legislation better, either, depending on how you look at it, offering Republican senators the opportunity to make this better. If you look at it from a strategic Democratic vantage point, to get them on the record on some really hard issues here. As you know, Leader Thune, he can lose one more vote. That math is very tricky. Explain to me what it is we're watching today unfold on the Senate floor, and whether or not you, in fact, think there is a Republican you can peel away from Thune.
Well, so there'll always be a chance. Remember, we need two, actually. One would be a tied Senate, and the vice president would have to come in. But two, giving us a 4 total, would be able to do it. And I don't know who those two could be. It could be Murkowski. It could be Collins. There's a number of others that are sort of in the mix. It's more likely we lose tonight than win. But we are going to spend as much time as we can shining a spotlight on either their hypocrisy or their cruelty in this bill, saying simple things like, hey, let's not give billionaires tax hit. If you're making over $100 million in America, how about we say that you get no benefit in tax breaks for this bill? Or maybe we'll give amendments about saving rural hospitals or saving Medicaid or saving food stamps. We're going to do everything we can on aspects of this bill that are horrible to shine a spotlight through our amendments and force them to vote again to try to defeat things that would help constituents in their own state. Now, whether that creates the kind of moral pressure and urgency to get them to change their vote, we don't know. But we will all not forget what happened in 2017. The more we strung out that fight, the more pressure was on senators, and ultimately Murkowski, Collins, and the late, great John McCain saved the Affordable Care Act. So we're hoping in the night tonight we may see another miracle like that kills this bill in the Senate and sends a clear message to Donald Trump that we're not going to let him in the Senate hurt millions and millions of Americans, take away their health care, take away their food supports, raise, unfortunately, their cost of living at a time when many Americans are just struggling day to day to get by.
Breaking news out of Washington, where the United States Senate is debating what would be, as a factual matter, the largest change and cut to the modern safety net in our time. President Trump's legislative agenda itself hangs in the balance. There are things in here that people think are very bad, big cuts to health care. There are things that Trump says are very good, but all of it drives through this budget process. We can see the Senate floor where they have been having what they call a vote-a-rama. The final vote on the budget could be hours away. There have been 2 defections already, so Republicans can actually only afford to lose a single additional vote in this round on the budget, with the deadline of the holiday barreling towards them at the end of the week. Now, Democrats have been doing their version of resistance, however slow and grinding the process is. This is not like what we've seen out in the country with No Kings protests or even Senator Cory Booker's dramatic long speech. This is the more dry aspect of the Senate, but still a place where Democratic senators say they will use every tool and lever they have while warning about what the bill would do.
When Donald Trump says this bill won't cut Medicaid, he's lying.
This is the most deeply immoral piece of legislation that I have ever voted on.
It's only a beautiful bill if you're a billionaire or a very wealthy person.
When he says this bill will grow the economy, he's lying.
These Republicans are scared of a tweet from Donald Trump.
It's a horrible piece of legislation. People are fearful.
When he says this is the best thing Congress could pass for our country, he's lying.
Senator Schumer there giving his version of an echo or rebuttal to what Donald Trump says. Democrats say that this bill is not just a difference of views about how to manage the debt, it grows the debt, or what to do about health care. It pushes many Americans who currently have a health care off it. And for people who don't follow the Senate as closely, who are busy living their lives or even making sense of their summer, spending time with family, friends, and kids, all the normal things, well, they are about to be hit, if this thing passes, with the loss of health care. They'll find out about it sooner or later. And that's why some Democrats you heard there say the whole thing is actually immoral. Now, we'll run through just some top line numbers. This is fiscally irresponsible by any definition because it's a choice to add trillions to the debt. And the choice is made not because there's some big expensive thing that the country needs or some foreign war or obligation, but rather a decision to give multimillionaires and billionaires even more in tax cuts. As a bottom line matter, the numbers you see on your screen mean that $2 trillion will go up towards the wealthy in a way they otherwise wouldn't get. $1 trillion cut out of Medicaid, 12 million people, ballpark, losing their health insurance as mentioned, another $186 billion cut out of support for some of the neediest in our country, including people who need food assistance. Republicans trying to defend it.
It's the best product that you can produce with the votes you can get.
What do you think this means for President Trump's legacy in the second term?
Well, this is his legacy.
You can also fulfill the promise of mass deportation.
President Trump is popular, and the bill is extremely popular.
We can debate Donald Trump, indeed. If you can hear the sound of my voice, if you're in America or follow American politics and news, you probably know that Donald Trump is not a very popular figure, but has managed to get elected again, that his popularity is somewhere in the low 40s. Whether you call that very popular or not is up to you. But when it comes to the bill, it's not even close. Across the board, This is a 20-point plus gap. 59% of the country, including a heck of a lot of people who are conservative or voted for Trump, saying they already oppose this budget, which hasn't even passed yet. That's just based on what they have heard about it in the summer with a heck of a lot of other things going on. In other words, it's got to be really bad for this many people to know what's in it and tell Fox News it's this bad. I want to bring in our experts tonight. Jason Johnson, politics professor with Morgan State University, MSNBC contributor Juanita Tolliver, an analyst for us, and the author of A More Perfect Party. Welcome to both of you. Jason, they have the power. They have some momentum, the Republicans do. And so if this were a kind of traditional GOP policy bill, I think you and I both know it would have passed by now. It seems to have so much in it that even, quote unquote, even Republicans are concerned about.
That's the thing, Ari. There is too much in the bill. And most Republicans or most elected officials, their primary job is like, look, I'm trying to get reelected. And so if you have a bill that has too many potential negative consequences, even the things that they do like in the bill, they can't vote for because they're going to have to answer for the bad parts. So that's why you have people like Thom Tillis saying, look, I'm going to make a moral judgment here. I'm not going to run for reelection, because he knows he couldn't have defended this bill if he was running for reelection. And that speaks to, frankly, Ari, the larger problem that the Republican Party seems to have, which is, while they have policies that a majority of American voters said that they wanted last fall, in actual execution, nobody likes what they're talking about. And so now they're stuck with a bill with an arbitrary due date, and they don't know what to do about it.
Yeah, I want you to go on, finish any other thoughts you want to share. But you mentioned Tillis. I think you might know, you could say I'm biased, but you might know that we have a pretty crack research team here on the beat. And their mind is where your mind is. So before we go any further, let's just listen to what Jason happened to mention off the top. Senator Thom Tillis, North Carolina Republican, pretty conservative, but he's still in a factual universe where kicking this many people off health care and Medicaid is a no-go. Take a listen.
What do I tell 663,000 people in 2 years or 3 years when President Trump breaks his promise by pushing them off of Medicaid because the funding's not there? I'm telling the president that you have been misinformed. You supporting the Senate mark will hurt people who are eligible and qualified for Medicaid.
People like his constituents, people in North Carolina. We wanted to share that. Jason mentioned it because it's become this whole clash. Tillis said this was his line. He's not going to sort of be in the middle end of his career and take a vote to undercut health care for those individuals. Trump was threatening him in all sorts of ways. We all know that routine. And Tillis said, fine, I won't seek re-election, but I'm not going to sell out my constituents' health care. Wall Street Journal says it could put Trump's whole presidency at risk, opening up a seat that is another pickup opportunity for Democrats. Jason?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is the problem, right? They can call it the big, beautiful bill all they want. Democrats can call it the big, bad bill. You can put yourself into whatever BBB tizzy, that you want to get into, right? You can try and spin this however you want. But people can read, and they've heard what they want to hear about this, and they don't like it. And those Republicans who know that they have to face their constituents next year, they have to figure out, what am I more afraid of? A primary by a Trump-backed candidate or getting kicked out of office in 2026? And I hope more of them make the decision that they're more concerned about the effect of this legislation on their voters than they are with something that comes from Trump.
Jason, you got more hope than me, friend. That's what I'll start by saying, because I don't have any faith in any other Republicans stepping forward and voting no on this.
What you're looking at right here is a live shot of the Senate floor where they are holding a marathon voting session. It's been going on for hours. It's nerdily called a vote-a-rama. It's all for the purposes of trying to jam through Donald Trump's big, ugly bill. And we're watching it very closely. We have reporters on the ground. We have reporters on the Hill. We have sources everywhere. And we will bring you any updates as it develops in any way at all. But while we wait for that, I want to start with some important context for what we are watching play out in Congress tonight. And that is this. Donald Trump's big, ugly bill is absolutely screwing over Donald Trump's own voters. It is also screwing over every elected Republican who represents them. They all know this. I mean, just look at the latest Fox News polling on this bill. Americans as a whole disapprove of the big ugly bill by a 21-point margin. No surprise. It's a terrible, terrible bill. Donald Trump doesn't really care about that. He probably somehow doesn't care about that number, which is crazy, but think about who we're dealing with. But he does care about his base. And his base also hates this bill. White men without college degrees. I mean, a key part of Trump's coalition that he won by 40 points just last November. How much did we talk about? White men without college degrees. That group opposes this bill by a 10-point margin. Rural white voters oppose this bill by an 11-point margin. Those are not the kinds of numbers you want to see around your signature piece of legislation with your hardcore base if you're the president of the United States. One of the big reasons this bill polls so badly with those key Trump demographic groups is the same reason everyone else hates it. The deep cuts to Medicaid that Republicans are trying to jam through the Senate and the House. And those cuts are set to disproportionately screw over Trump's own voters. Here's how one analysis from the Washington Post summed it up quite well, I would say. In counties where more than 1/4 of the population is on Medicaid, Trump gained 17 percentage points on average over the party's 2012 performance. 17 points. More than double his average gain in counties with low Medicaid enrollment rates. In other words, those Medicaid cuts will be felt the most in the places that were most crucial to Trump's 2 election victories. And Republicans know how unpopular those cuts are with their own voters. I mean, over the weekend, Donald Trump's own pollster, his own pollster, urged Senate Republicans to scale back these cuts, saying, quote, "The working class Americans who gave President Trump his overwhelming victory as well as majorities in the House and Senate deserve nothing less." That's Trump's own pollster. Senate Republicans, for their part, also seem to know that these cuts are going to hurt their voters. Former Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell reportedly told members of his caucus, quote, "I know a lot of us are hearing from people back home about Medicaid, but they'll get over it." He literally apparently said that, reportedly. See, this bill is so deeply unpopular that Republicans are intentionally ignoring the people they represent and just plowing forward to get it passed. And they're going to have to ignore a lot of other people while they're at it, because the opposition to this bill is broad and it's diverse. I mean, the group I'm about to tell you about is not on a group chat, no way, in any scenario. They're not at a Thanksgiving dinner table. They never would be. But they all absolutely hate this bill. It's opposed by teachers and educators across the country. It's opposed by faith leaders of all denominations, including at least 20 Catholic bishops. It's opposed by major unions around the country. It's opposed by hospital associations in at least 14 states. It's opposed by Trump's former campaign chair and longtime advisor Steve Bannon. It's opposed by Trump's top campaign donor Elon Musk, who just today threatened to fund primary challenges to any Republican who supports the bill. And it's opposed by North Carolina Republican Senator Thom Tillis, who decided this weekend that he'd rather give up his Senate seat than be pressured into voting for this bill.
So what do I tell 663,000 people in 2 years or 3 years when President Trump breaks his promise by pushing them off of Medicaid? Now Republicans are about to make a mistake on health care and betraying a promise. It is inescapable that this bill in its current form will betray the very promise that Donald J. Trump made. You supporting the Senate mark will hurt people who are eligible and qualified for Medicaid. I will be withholding my vote. Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, all true. Everything you said is true. Before you give him a Profile and Courage Award, this is the guy who saved Pete Hegseth. But my point is this. He saved Pete Hegseth, but he can't he can't push himself to support this bill. Think about that for a second. He's not even the only one. Because even Republican senators who are likely to support this bill can't deny just how much it screws over working people. Just listen to Republican Senator Josh Hawley, who says he is likely to support the bill. And remember that as you listen to what he had to say.
We can't be cutting health care for working people and for poor people in order to constantly give special tax treatment to corporations and other entities.
I mean, we shouldn't be, but again, that is from a Republican senator who says he will support the bill. Well, you just heard about cutting health care for working people to fund tax breaks for corporations was from a Republican yes vote. Democratic Senator Brian Schatz summed up that moment I just played kind of perfectly when he said, I think what makes this video so compelling is that he's very convincing, but he couldn't convince himself. There you have it. And again, the reason people like Josh Hawley sound so exasperated right now is simple. Trump is forcing them to screw over their own voters. I mean, they're making their own choices, but this is Trump's bill. And for the record, in Hawley's home state of Missouri, tens of thousands of people, if not more, would lose health care as a result of this bill. He and the overwhelming majority of Republicans, though, have made the calculation that supporting Trump is apparently more important than supporting the people they represent. And they are making it very clear that this big unpopular bill is also the core of Trump's agenda.
What do you think this means for President Trump's legacy in the second term?
Well, this is his legacy. This is going to fund his legacy.
President Trump is the best negotiator, the best leader of our party that we've ever had, and this bill is so good and so strong.
This is his campaign promise. It's the fulfillment of all the things that he told the American public that he would do.
So even as core supporters in Congress aren't leaving a doubt about who owns this bill, Trump owns this bill's estimated $3.3 trillion increase in the deficit. He owns the decision to kick an estimated 11.8 million people off their health insurance. Trump owns it all. Right now, we're still waiting to see if this bill will pass and in what form it will pass. Republicans have the upper hand. I mean, they can afford to lose as many as 3 votes in the Senate. In addition to Thom Tillis, Republican Senator Rand Paul has also pledged to vote no on this bill, though for different reasons. Senator Susan Collins says she is leaning toward voting no, though I think we all know if history is any precedent, that means very little at this point in the process. We'll see where she actually votes. Several other Republican senators are holding out for votes on amendments to the bill. And even if it passes the Senate, the bill will still need to face another vote in the House. Tonight, Speaker Johnson is still pleading with Senate Republicans to make changes to the bill to appease his own members, because even as horrible as the House bill is, somehow this Senate bill got worse. And even that guy, Mike Johnson, Trump's buddy, is a little concerned about the Senate bill. But even through all of the Republican infighting, and there has been a lot, one thing has been pretty consistent on the other side. Democrats have made clear they are not going to stop hammering just how much this bill screws regular people, and it does. Here was Senator Raphael Warnock speaking late into the evening last night.
My friends on the other side are giving billionaires and the richest of the rich a tax cut. They are working real hard tonight to help billionaires because God knows they are having a hard time, apparently. Your health care is about to go up. Your hospital might close because they're cutting these clean energy tax cuts. Your utility bills are about to go up. And so I have a question tonight. Who voted for that? This is not just a health care fight. It is that. It is not just a fight for food security, for SNAP. It is that. But in a real sense, it is a fight for our democracy, whose voice gets to be heard in this chamber. That's what this is about.
Senator Schiff, thank you very much for making the time to join us. I know that it was your amendment that was just on the floor. It was your amendment to guarantee food assistance be continued for families with children under 12, and every Republican in the Senate, 53 of them, voted against your amendment to guarantee nutritional support for children under 12 in this country. Did you think you had a chance of at least peeling off a few Republicans on this one?
I did think there was a chance of peeling off at least a few Republicans because, after all, how do you make the argument that feeding hungry kids is somehow a waste? But that's the argument they're making. They made one additional argument, which is we'd have to go back to committee to fix this, to make sure we're not leaving kids hungry, and we're not willing to spend the time. That was the other argument. This bill is bad in innumerable ways, in taking health care away from people, but in taking food away from our kids. And what's more, not just the kids of today going hungry, but they're also borrowing from our kids and grandkids to pay for this tax cut. So it's just a terrible betrayal, really. And I think about my parents' generation, the greatest generation, and I think about this generation now as reflected in these priorities. And this is the selfish generation, the generation that says we're going to take away from hungry kids and give ourselves a tax cut. We're going to take away from our kids and grandkids, raise the national debt, take money from them to give ourselves a tax cut. It's just awful.
You know, Senator, I've been reporting on what the Republicans, Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and with the full support of Republicans in Congress, have done to USAID, in which by killing the United States Agency for International Development, they literally and specifically took food away from starving children in Africa and elsewhere. But right in the middle of a famine in Africa, they pulled the food away. And we have several reports now of hundreds of thousands of deaths as a result of what they've done by taking food away and taking medicine away. But in covering that, one of the things I was thinking, which I haven't really said, is they wouldn't do that in the United States. And it turns out your amendment tells me I was wrong about that.
Yeah, sadly, you would have been wrong if you try to make that distinction. It's just not about cutting off aid to those outside the country. It's about cutting off assistance food to people inside the country. And what's more, with respect to the health care cuts, there are now credible studies that thousands of Americans are going to die as a result of these health care cuts, maybe tens of thousands of Americans. So this is the cost, literally the cost to the American people of this bill: loss of life, more hungry families. And what do we get out of it? What's the benefit? Well, Lawrence, if people out there watching are making more than $5 million a year, they're going to get a tax cut of $346,000 a year. So if you're really doing well, there's a big tax cut coming your way. If you're a single parent trying to feed your kids, then you're in for tremendous hardship.
And Senator, speaking of waste, in the mantra of waste, fraud, and abuse that Republicans want to use, I had occasion to drive by the federal building in Westwood in Los Angeles this weekend, which has the worst use of military troops I've ever seen in my life. It's the most peaceable place, as you know. There's no more peaceful federal building in America than that one in Westwood. And you have soldiers at blocking every driveway there in the most wasteful possible deployment of soldiers I have ever seen.
Well, I think that's right. And it's also having two other impacts now. One is we're very much in fire season. There are fires burning in California as we speak. And those guardsmen are needed to help us battle those fires once again, to help those frontline communities. And what's more, I think the morale is really starting to suffer now. That is, people who signed up for the Guard did so because they wanted to protect and defend their country. They didn't sign up to do domestic law enforcement, let alone to be used as a political tool the way Donald Trump is. So it is, I think, harming morale in the Guard. It is harming our defenses against fire. And it is really breaching the trust that Californians have in our own Guard. We love our National Guard. They're there for us in times of trouble. And this is just eroding that relationship.
Republican Senator Thom Tillis's decision not to seek re-election has taken what was already expected to be a blockbuster Senate race in North Carolina and supercharged it. Tillis drew the ire of the president for opposing his mega budget bill and lamented that Congress's independent thinkers are, in his words, an endangered species. And now, without an election to worry about, he is not mincing words.
Republicans are about to make a mistake on health care and betraying a promise. It is inescapable that this bill in its current form will betray the very promise that Donald J. Trump made in the Oval Office or in the cabinet room when I was there with finance. I'm telling the president that you have been misinformed. You supporting the Senate mark will hurt people who are eligible and qualified for Medicaid.
NBC News reports that among the Republicans considering a run to replace Tillis is the president's daughter-in-law, Laura Trump. Asked about the odds she does run, a source close to the Trump family said, quote, "I'd put it as high as one could be considering it. I know she's thoughtful and will pray on it, and it'll probably come once she is prepared. It could be sooner rather than later." I want to bring in former campaign manager and White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations under President Obama, Jim Messina, and Stuart Stevens is back with us. Okay, Stuart, that source close to the Trump family also said if she gets in, the race will be over before it begins. Would it immediately, say, eliminate a congressman, Pat Harrigan, who's been seen as a possible contender? What's your take on a possible Senator Laura Trump?
I think she'd be a disaster for Republicans. Well, two things are true. The race probably would be over. She would win the primary, and she'd probably be the worst candidate that they could field. This has been a very tightly contested state. It's one of the states that Romney won and that Obama had won before. I don't think there's anything that's going on now inside the Trump world, what he's delivering, that makes him more popular in North Carolina. Tom Tillis is sort of a tragic figure to mine. I think he's a very decent man, has an interesting background, moved around all his life, never went to the same high school 2 years in a row, has a real sense of humanity, and yet he became a Trumper. It reminds me of the quote Churchill said about Chamberlain. You had a choice between dishonor and war. You chose dishonor, and you will have war. And there's just so many Republicans like him. So now he's speaking what I think he's always felt, and you can hear in his voice that it's very passionate.
Boy, was he passionate. Jim, even prior to that announcement, the North Carolina Senate seat, as you know, was a top target for Democrats who need a net gain of 4 seats to control the Senate. Does the fact that he's gone, does the fact that Laura Trump might get in change Democratic strategy, or will no one know until we hear from a popular former Democratic governor and whether he's going to run or not?
Boy, Chris, I have some bipartisan agreement with Stuart on this one. Like, Laura Trump is a dream for Democrats. I think she will lose that seat because she won't be
What
able
is it about her? Yeah, tell me.
She will not be able to separate herself from Donald Trump and all the things he just did. A normal candidate can come out there and say, look, I disagree with the president on a couple of things. I'm a different kind of Republican. The way Tom Tillis won 2 very, very close Senate races. He won by less than 2 points last time. This is a state that Trump only won by 3 points in the last election. It is the prototypical swing state. And Laura Trump will just own all the anger at what President Trump is doing to these voters. I think that Tillis clip you showed on the floor, you're going to see that in a whole bunch of campaign ads. And to your point, the Democratic Party is waiting to hear from on high with the wildly popular former governor, Roy Cooper, trying to decide whether or not he's going to run. It looks like he will. That is a very big moment. And I think if he looks at this race and looks at Laura Trump as his possible opponent, he's going to say, oh, hell yes.
Well, Jim, let me ask you a little bit more about Tillis, because fed-up members of Congress, as you well know, aren't limited to Republicans. And members of Congress being fed up, frankly, isn't unique to 2025. But having said that, members of the Senate have long felt powerful, and frankly, for pretty good reason. Are those days, if not gone, fast disappearing?
Certainly in the Republican Party, they are, Chris, and you're having more people retire because all they're doing, to Stuart's point, is doing what Donald Trump tells them to do. The days of, people working across party lines to get things done have largely disappeared in the Senate. And you have members from both sides retiring, saying, look, we're just not doing anything anymore. And, there was this hope that they could sort of be a break to Trump and sort of say, no, we're going to do it the way the Senate's always done it. And we're going to put together a bill that makes more sense. And that's just not what they're doing. They're putting a bill together that is wildly unpopular. 78% of voters say they don't want any cuts to Medicaid. Chris, this cuts by almost $1 trillion. By the way, weirdly, 78% is also the approval rating of George Washington in the United States. So, two things you probably don't want to trash, Stuart, are Medicaid and George Washington, 2 things voters seem to really, really like.
All right. So, Stuart, Tillis said this wasn't a hard decision. He said there was a very powerful statement he put out. He said he'd rather be with his family, be with his wife and his kids and his grandkids, than navigating what he called the political theater and partisan gridlock of Washington. And listen to this.
Is there any room for disagreement with Donald Trump in the Republican Party today?
I think if you have the courage to, and if you don't, there isn't. It's all what you want to do as an individual member.
So it would make sense, if he's right about that, Stuart, that Laura Trump would indeed not worry about running because she's going to agree with Donald Trump. But if you're a Roy Cooper, if you're another Republican who thinks I've got to be more moderate in order to have a chance of winning against a Democrat, should I get the nomination, why would you get in?
Yeah, you've just outlined why the Republican Party is really not functioning as a traditional American political party. It's become an extremist.
But even as a Democrat, I mean, when you see so many frustrated people, why would you say, you know what, I think I'm going to run and I'll just wait out the next 3.5 years of the Trump term, or by then it will be, 2.5 years?
Well, I think because you're sitting there and you're looking at terrible things that are happening to the country. And you feel a sense of patriotism. And look, I spent a lot of my life making arguments against the Democratic Party. And I don't know any other honest conclusion to come to that it's the only pro-democracy party in America now. And you can disagree on this and that, but really it's about larger stuff. And there's just no question that the Republican Party is really functioning as an autocracy. So what is another sign of that? The autocrat's relative gets placed in power. That's how things go in Russia, North Korea. It's not a traditional American sort of system here. And, it just breaks my heart that Republicans have just collapsed. And you saw with Senator Tillis, he could have stopped Pete Hegseth. He wanted to, clearly, then something got said and he didn't. And I would bet you anything he regrets that. And that's just where the party is, and it's a tragedy.
Well, maybe we'll find out in his book if he writes one. Stuart Stevens, Jim Messina, thank you both so much.